Alright everyone, we start off today talking about the coming possible dark winter. Of course, right now it's still August, so in the northern hemisphere it's nice and green and warm and nice rains and kitties and things like that, but keep in mind, especially if you're in the northern part of the US or like Canada, winter's a couple of months away basically, let's face it. By the way, they're already prepping the bull. They're already prepping people to panic and go crazy again by saying, oh, the flu season's going to be terrible. See, if they manage to tamp down on COVID because of vaccines, oh, now flu is the problem. Well, you still need lockdowns and masking up, even though that's literally what caused the flu season to be bad. Yes, they have weakened people's immune systems. It's very unfortunate. It's going to cause a lot of deaths. Keep in mind, first and foremost, before I get into this and my suggestions for people, there will be a pinned comment down below if you're watching this video on YouTube. I make 2 videos a day that aren't on YouTube. They're only on these other sites. So I put them on Minds now. Used to be Dailymotion, but they decided to screw the pooch. BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble. And I do that because I cover topics that you're no longer allowed to speak about on YouTube, or I have opinions on topics that are no longer allowed on YouTube. I'm not going to stop expressing myself, but YouTube is no longer broadcast yourself. It's broadcast Beijing, basically. Keeping this in mind, it's funny because Xinhua News the other day was literally peddling COVID disinfo on Twitter. As Xinhua News from China, Xinhua, technically, won't give them the benefit of the proper pronunciation, talking about how some cholesterol drug in trials was good for COVID treatment. I'm going to hold my breath and end up asphyxiating and dying until Twitter actually punishes them for COVID disinfo. I guarantee that they won't face any repercussions for it because, of course, Twitter is partially owned by Beijing at this point. So is YouTube. There's a reason why you're not allowed to criticize China too much without being labeled a xenophobe these days. At this time, not because of COVID, and I'll get into why, but because of the human response to COVID, and especially the government-level response to COVID, I suggest stocking up. If you do not have a firearm, you should have a firearm. You should have ammo. Yeah, it's expensive right now. Fuck it. Literally bite the bullet and get a few hundred rounds. You might have to hunt small game or something this winter. That's not an exaggeration. Yes, you should have toilet paper. That was the one thing that I didn't mention before, and plenty of like dried staples, things that'll store long term. Fucking bags of lentils and rice and things like that. Some spices and salt, of course, iodized. You can survive on that for a very long period of time. Just so people are aware, staple grain, staple legume, some stuff to make it palatable, and you're golden. You might want to have some water stocked up too. The reason I say this is not because of COVID. COVID no longer has any relevance to me outside of human systems. When I look at COVID, with the exception of the possibility that it mutates because of vaccines causing evolution, causing the virus to evolve, it is innate, it's inevitable that'll happen. It is possible it evolves into a variant that's more deadly. That's historically not likely. It's possible. It has happened before. The other possibility is it could mutate into a variant that causes the vaccinated or the previously exposed to experience cytokine storm, killing 5-10% of them. That would be an enormous, it would be the worst event since probably the Holodomor at that point. And kill way more people, by the way. You'd see hundreds of millions dead. But that's not likely. It's possible, but it's not likely. What is likely is that governments now are running on fumes with regards to the fear-mongering, and so they're going to start, there's going to be more lockdownism again, I think. What I fear is that governments are going to reimpose manufacturing restrictions. This is going to cause some shortages on the surface. And then people, because of that, will freak out and start stocking up, amplifying the problem. Some of you out there, you're older, you're a vulnerable individual, etc. You can do, for $50, you can have weeks of supply of food. Again, rice, dried beans, make sure to get the toilet paper, although that's plentiful. You might as well buy it now. Peanut butter, some crackers, things like that. Is it the tastiest diet in the world? No. Are you capable of living on that for several weeks to several months? Yeah. Maybe you get a bottle of vitamin pills. And if you're, in the middle class, you have the money to put aside $100 to feed yourself and your family and make sure that you've got the things you need. Potatoes, onions, root crops that you can store in a cool, dry place and they'll store for several months at a time. Make sure to bring the can opener if you're relying on canned goods. It's a perennial joke. I told people to do this before. last year. And I was correct. And literally hundreds of people messaged me, and I can't even imagine how many didn't message me, that got the memo, decided to get some basic stuff, and didn't end up having a problem, because for several weeks there, for 2-3 weeks, there was a lot missing from the aisles. It even impacted here, I think to a lesser degree, for the most part. Part of it was manufacturing, and part of it was human beings being human beings and overreacting to what ended up being not so much a pandemic crisis, so much as a human crisis, a human behavioral crisis. The problem is that you see them attempting at the moment to set things up for another panic-related crisis. You see them talking about, and this gives me the forewarning, this is why I'm warning you. I pay attention to the linguistics and when I'm analyzing the news. The things that they are saying seem like a potential lead-up to trying to lock things down again. Will they be universally successful? No, but keep in mind, let's say you're in Florida. This is the other part. You're in Florida. DeSantis says, hell no, we won't go. You're not going to have lockdowns. You're not going to have masks, no restrictions. DeSantis is going to protect your right to assemble, your right to speak freely, and so forth. You'll have the ability to go to the store and you won't have to wear a hazmat suit, in other words. That's perfectly fine. The problem is that Florida imports a lot of goods from states that will down their manufacturing sectors. They'll say, no, we have to be at 50% capacity again because there's the epsilon lambda omega variant and it's 0.1% more deadly and it's killing people that are a little bit younger, so we need to lock things back down. So when the Texas pork manufacturer or the Louisiana hot sauce company or something shuts it down its operations or throttles them, what happens? Shortages and higher costs. That's what happens. Unfortunately, this tends to occur when you have a globalized system. Hey, transatlantic trade, trans-Pacific trade. Keep that in mind. It involves other countries. Now, some of those countries don't really have a constitution that involves the right of people to go about their day-to-day life in peace. It involves totalitarianism on a level that the United States is thankfully not quite yet at, or Western Europe. Keep in mind as well, people panic. Not everyone is sensible when it comes to these things. There are people right now that still genuinely believe that COVID is going to wipe mankind off the face of the earth, and they're like hunkered in the bunker. There are also people who ignore the human element, and they think, well, nothing's wrong. I don't need to take any steps because COVID means nothing. Well, to you it doesn't. To me it doesn't as well, but I understand that that's not the case universally. Ultimately, the government tries to make people afraid in order to pass more laws. We see this with the infrastructure bill. Biden keeps trying to dovetail his Bidenflation causing $3.5 trillion pork barrel package with COVID response. Well, we need this infrastructure, and somehow building bridges and roads and everything except for walls mainly is related to COVID. Well, it's not. That's not a sane opinion to hold. It's just not reasonable. It's the reason why idiots like Mitt the Twit Romney are actually on board with the so-called compromise bill that was attendant to it. That's not really necessary, but the government's doing that anyway. You look at online. Corporations, big tech, literally taking people's channels down for topical differences of opinion well within the realm of the scientific method and the debate that should be had over any pathogen that exists, but they're not allowed to talk about it. It's just like they can question any election in the world except the 2020 presidential U.S. election. They can also question any other disease in the world except for the response to COVID. This uniqueness also concerns me greatly. It concerns me because it indicates that either the powers that be understand that it genuinely is unique, in which case you start getting sugar plum fairies along with visions of bioweapons programs in your head, or it's not, and there's an ulterior motive behind it, and I really can't fathom any other particular reason why it would be treated so uniquely, and uniquely as well, cross-platform. All of big tech, all big governments in the Western world treating it fundamentally the same way in very short order. I don't believe that's coincidence. I think the government is going to continue to misuse COVID and people's fear of COVID to try to dovetail it in with reckless spending, maybe wars. Certainly with censorship and propaganda, you may see shortages. You may see manufacturing. Look, half the small businesses in the United States alone have been gutted. They're either running on fumes or they went out of business. The number of small businesses, like even in my native Rutland, and this is back in February, so it's probably worse by now, that are gone now, there's quite a few of them. They're not coming back. They went bankrupt. Thomas's Dairy was like one of the first, literally the dairy down the road that I always drank milk from for the last fucking 20 years or something, just happens to be the first business that goes under. I don't know how many people they employed. It was a small family dairy operation. Now that's jobs lost. It's tax revenue lost. It's a landmark loss. The milk was really good, by the way. No hormones. Can any of the other milk manufacturers in South Central Vermont say the same? Yeah, if you go to some person's literal farm and you want to buy it under the table, skirting FDA policy on pasteurization, I suppose. But you prepare. Again, I should probably make like a comprehensive list video or something of the things to stock up on, but it's really self-explanatory. Again, staple grains, maybe you don't like rice, and maybe you like sorghum, oatmeal, something. Staple legumes, I like lentils, people like kidney beans or whatever, and canned or dried. Either way, they're going to store for a long time. Again, with dried, you don't need a can opener. You just saved $1, $2 or something. Coffee. Think of the luxury goods that you will need when the power is out and everything is falling to hell and people are panicking outside, and you're sitting there with your 22, if you need meat, and with your other staples, and you're not starving. You'll be fine, at least in the intermediate period. You could have an economic response that causes a Great Depression. All of a sudden, 20-30% of the population of the world is unemployed. What do you think happens with the population density as high as it is today? People will riot. They'll loot stores, and then the shortages will be even worse. You, at least in the meantime, will be taken care of. Now, am I predicting that this happens? It's less certain than last time, which is good. That's the good news. But they're trying damn hard to make it happen. And that's really what worries me. Definitely there's plenty of staple beans and rice and things around here. You know, black beans and rice, it is one hell of a dish, and spices are cheap. That's about all. Peace out.